is Donna Druchunas, and in this video I'm going to show you the difference between regular ribbing, this is 1x1 ribbing, and twisted stitch ribbing. You can see it has a different texture, regular ribbing, twisted stitch ribbing. Just by looking at it, it has a different appearance. And I generally work very loosely, not on purpose, but naturally when I make ribbing. So I find that twisted stitch ribbing gives my fabric more structure for a lot of projects. So I will often use twisted stitch ribbing instead of 1x1 plain ribbing in a lot of projects. In Bavarian twisted stitch projects, such as these mittens, there are no plain knits in the whole project. So all of the stitches in the ribbing section, as well as in the pattern section, are twisted. The purls are regular, but the knits are twisted. So you look at this closely, you can see that when you make a regular knit stitch, I'm going to stick this needle behind the two legs of the stitch. See how those two legs of the stitch are laying next to each other? They kind of make a V towards the bottom. They come together closer on the bottom, but they don't cross each other. They stay side by side. That's a regular knit stitch, and in this ribbing it's knit one, purl one, knit one, purl one. Now in this ribbing, if I stick my needle behind one of those and kind of stretch it out for you, you can see at the bottom the two legs of the stitch, they're not laying next to each other, they're overlapping each other. And so instead of being like this, they're going like that. And that makes it more like a little bit of an X instead of a V. But the main point is that they're overlapping, and that's what a twisted knit does. The two legs of the stitch cross, and it makes a more herringbone look pattern instead of knit one, purl one ribbing when it's not stretched. It really looks a lot like stockinette stitch. In this you can see the gap where the purls are a little better than you can here. The ribbing closes up and hides the purls in the regular ribbing. But they're both very stretchy. You can open them both up a lot. This one's a little softer because when you do the twisted stitches, it adds a little bit more body. When you're working with the same size needles, can you see how these purls that are hidden are kind of the same on both, but the knits look a little bit bigger on the regular ribbing than they do on the twisted stitch ribbing. So the stitches get tightened up a little when you twist them. So that's what they look like. And now let me just show you how to do that. This is what we're going to be doing in the cuff of the mittens that we're doing a knit along for right now. These Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Eve. It's got the twisted ribbing on the cuff. Now I start with a long tail cast on, and I usually work over two needles held together or over a larger size needle because I want the ribbing, whether it's regular ribbing or twisted ribbing, to be stretchy. I don't want the cuff on my mitten to be binding. So you just want a loose cast on. If you have a different one that you use that's stretchy, it'll work fine with these ribbings. So here I am. I switched colors just so you can see the row I'm knitting a little bit better. And if you look here, you can see the stitches I've already knit. On the previous rows, you can see the crossings that this is twisted stitch knitting for the ribbing. So the only difference is how you make the knit stitch is where you put the needle in. Normally we go like this to make a knit and insert the needle this way when we say knitwise. You see how I'm opening up the two legs of the stitch there? And if I finish knitting it, those two legs of the stitch say separate. That's a regular knit. Of course, everyone knows that. Basically, most of us knit that way. There are other ways to knit that are a little different, but in the US and Europe, Northern, Western Europe, most of us knit that way. So to make a twisted stitch, instead of going into the stitch like that, we're going to put our right needle into the back of the stitch from right to left. It's almost like purlwise, except we're going into the back. And then you finish the stitch however you normally do, and you get a twisted knit. So here we have the one that's not twisted, the one that is twisted. And when you work in these twisted traveling stitches or just twisted ribbing, the purls are done normally. We'll be working in the round because I use this only in the round. I don't like doing it back and forth, but I usually use it on socks and mittens and things like that. So twisted stitch, regular purl. And if you hold the yarn in your right hand, it's the same thing, because how you make the stitch is not any different. It's just instead of going in this way, you go in that way, and then you throw your yarn your normal way. Okay, so that's how you make a twisted stitch for twisted stitch ribbing. That's the first step in our knit along for the Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Eve. We'll get a lot of practice making the twisted stitches for the ribbing, and then we'll come back in a week and we'll learn how to make the stitches go on a diagonal and cross over each other, and how to do shaping for the thumb gore.